Hi, I'm Eric, also known as Trekkie V47, from the Ranger Command Power Hour and the Starfleet Escape Podcast. You're listening to another great Four-Eyed Radio product. For more shows, check out foureyedradio.com. It's morphin' time!
Starfleet Escape Podcast. Prepare for launch in 3, 2, 1. Enjoy the ride.
Welcome to the Starfleet Escape Podcast on the Four-Eyed Radio Network, where we escape into the Star Trek universe. This is episode number 40 and is being recorded on May 16th, 2014. Today's topic, transporter accidents and oddities. I'm Eric.
And I'm Aaron. This episode is brought to you by Raven Designs, illustrations and designs that fit your personality. For samples and inquiries, visit ravencruise.com.
Hey, Aaron.
Hello, Eric. How are you this week?
It's been quite busy.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a horrible way with work.
Awesome.
It's just really busy at work and kind of stressful. But been doing some podcasts, recorded Ranger Command, and now we're recording today. And
nice.
Doing some editing, and you know how that goes.
Oh, do I ever?
So, how are you this week?
Not too bad. Work is work, and I've also been working on a LaCars program. Yes,
it's actually really cool. I've downloaded the beta, and I really like it. I think a lot of people get a kick out of it.
Thank you. I've actually improved it since the beta you got. It's improved a little bit. I added a simple calculator to it.
You mean a treculator?
Oh, snap. Treculator.
That sounds too much like checkulator.
Yeah, it does. I know our new sign-off. Treculator.
Oh my god, we're totally using that.
True that.
All right, so why don't you say we get into the news?
Let's do it. So, Star Trek The Exhibition will come to the EMS Exhibit Center in Hall of America on Friday, May 16th for an extended 6-month stay.
So starting today, as we record this, it's open. I live within a reasonable driving distance, like 6 hours away. So one of my old roommates and good friends is actually driving up there later this summer to see her parents. Okay. And when I posted about this news, she was like, hey, maybe you could join me and my husband and visit Minnesota and go to the Mall of America and see this exhibit. And I was like, that sounds like a road trip. So I might actually see this.
That would be
finally.
Awesome.
Yeah. Because I have no idea when this is ever coming to Chicago.
Who knows?
They've been to Detroit, and I missed that one. Mm-hmm. And now they're in Minnesota at the Mall of America. So I think right now that's the closest I'm going to get to this.
Probably. Yeah.
I want to see all the props. I want to see all the cool stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love props. Who doesn't love props?
True that.
True that.
Kate Mulgrew's Orange is the New Black is renewed for a 3rd season. Now, have you watched Orange is the New Black?
I have not. I'll ask you the same.
I have not either. But Kate Mulgrew plays Galina Red Reznikov in the series. And she's a character in this show. I think she's the cook of the prison? I'm not sure, just judging by her uniform.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I'd like to know what people think of it, if anyone wants to let us know. Should we watch this? This is on Netflix, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why I shouldn't be watching this. I mean, it's Kate Mulgrew, so...
Right.
She's my captain.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is she your favorite captain?
I really hate these favorite questions in Star Trek because I really love the whole franchise.
Right.
And it really depends on my mood or what I feel like. I think my favorite captain is Picard.
Okay.
But I think right up there is Archer. I really like Archer.
Mm-hmm.
But Janeway would be a close third, followed by Cisco and then Kirk.
Okay.
I don't know. See, it always changes. You could ask me 6 months from now, and be like, oh, Cisco's awesome. And it could be because I just watched a whole bunch of Deep Space Nine. You don't know.
True.
But yeah, Orange is the New Black. I guess maybe I'll Netflix binge this weekend and watch it.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yeah. Patrick Stewart will star in a new Starz comedy series, Blunt Talk, where Stewart will play a Stephen Colbert-type character as a British TV show host of a cable news show. This seems kind of interesting. I like Stephen Colbert, and I love Patrick Stewart.
Well, this new comedy is from Seth MacFarlane.
Oh.
And Seth MacFarlane is a huge Star Trek fan.
True that.
And Patrick Stewart has been on both Family Guy and American Dad. Both are Seth MacFarlane shows.
And Seth MacFarlane was cameoed in an Enterprise episode.
In a couple Enterprise episodes.
In a couple? Oh,
yeah. He was in a few in the background. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Seth MacFarlane produces Cosmos, and
yes.
Patrick Stewart voiced a short animated segment of Cosmos.
Yes, and I love that show. I think everyone needs to be watching Cosmos.
True that.
It will make your mind go like...
I've seen some Twitter conversations where he says, "Oh, it's only going to be this one season," and everyone's like, "Come on, you need to, make another season of this. Let's go, let's do it." Hopefully, we'll see.
I want them to do more. Next, a researcher creates holodeck with Oculus and Kinect. Oliver Krelos has combined 3 Kinects with an Oculus Rift to import a 3D representation of himself into virtual reality. Oh my god, it's happening.
Yeah, not quite the same as Star Trek's holodeck, but approaching reality.
Yes. I like that it's using current technology with the Oculus, which I guess is becoming a new thing that they want everyone to have. And 3 Kinects, I mean, that's pretty sweet.
Right. It's using the original Kinect, so the imaging quality isn't as good as the Kinect 2.
You mean the Xbox One Kinect?
Yeah. Isn't it like the Kinect 2?
No.
It's just the Xbox One Kinect?
Yes.
That's lame.
But yeah, I also saw something where they took an Oculus and put someone on kind of like this treadmill gyro thing.
Uh-huh.
So you're in the virtual reality, but you're walking and your movements correspond with your character. So I think that's even more approaching the holodeck.
Right, because that's basically what the holodeck did.
Yes. But instead of treadmills, it was just like force fields and perspective changes, and we're getting there.
Yeah, definitely. It's very cool, and hopefully...
I hope by the time I'm 50, there's an actual holodeck. I think that'd be cool.
That would be cool. One thing that's weird about this this setup is that you can do first person and third person. If you go on the link in the show notes, it has a little video of it going on, and he starts off in first person, then throws it to third person, and he says that it's disorientating to see himself in third person.
I see.
Like, moving around. But in third person, the image looked a lot clearer than in first person. Because if you know how you're looking at the Kinect, and it has that little, I guess...
it's a sensor. Yeah, it's a little sensor on the bottom.
Right, and it's kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
That's how the representation looks in Oculus.
Well, I know with the Xbox One Kinect, the resolution is superb. Like, it's a whole lot better. So maybe you'd actually see a realistic photo representation that's more sharper than what they have right now.
Right.
But that's pretty cool.
Indeed it is. Next, Orci to direct Star Trek 3.
So, obviously, we're talking about Roberto Orci, who wrote the first 2 Star Trek movies with, isn't it like Kirkman or his writing partner?
Oh, yeah, his writing partner, which I read that they were splitting up
Yes, I read that too.
to do separate projects.
Which is interesting because they've done a lot of great movies together. I just saw The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and they were credited as writers, and I didn't even know they worked on that, so I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, so, I mean, hopefully this is a good thing. Some people on the internet are not happy with the choice, but
When are people on the internet ever going to be happy?
That's true. And this will be his directorial debut in Star Trek 3.
But see, I'm not worried about it because he's already been connected to the process of the other two movies. And, he wrote the other two movies. He knows these characters, and I think he knows the direction that he wants to take this movie. So... If anything, maybe the last two movies he was working more closely with Abrams and maybe learning some directorial stuff.
Right.
So I have no problems with this. I think it's in good hands. Yeah. Hopefully less lens flare.
I'm sure there will be less lens flare.
This is my favorite story this week, and I wish I had the money for this. But a mansion with Star Trek-themed theater is set up for sale for $35 million. It's currently owned by Mark Bell, a financier, producer, and former CEO of adult networking site FriendFinder. One of his rooms is a Trek-themed theater, including a Borg alcove. And this theater is modeled after the Next Generation bridge. And in the back, the bar looks like something from Deep Space Nine and the Promenade.
Right.
And it's amazing. And he also has a game room in his mansion, which has 3 Star Trek pinball machines.
Right.
This is awesome.
That's pretty cool. And he also has a Call of Duty themed gaming room where you can play video games in.
That's awesome. And this is in Florida. So, I mean, that's cool.
I guess. If you like hurricanes.
And crazy people. But,
Face Off, yeah.
But no, I mean, you should... all of our listeners should check out the pictures on our links that are in our show notes. It's really cool. I swear to God, if I was a millionaire and I was a Star Trek fan, well, I am a Star Trek fan, but if I was a millionaire Star Trek fan, I would buy this in a heartbeat. This is cool. Or I'd do it in my own house. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I would do if I could. Man, I would make at least a floor of my house all Star Trek.
Yeah.
With automation.
What's interesting, and you'll probably get a kick out of this, Aaron, if you go to the Business Insider article, they blow up a picture of the TNG-style room that he has, and all along the floor are a ton of tribbles. There's like tribbles all along the floor.
Wow, nice.
So I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
No doubt, no doubt.
But yeah, I totally want a room like that.
True that. So next up is not exactly Star Trek news, but I thought was hysterical, and I wanted to talk about it really quick.
Okay.
So Pope Francis says that he would definitely baptize extraterrestrials if they asked him to.
Yes! So now we can get aliens into our religion.
Exactly, because they would want to, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't have their own religion that they would, try to force upon us.
Yeah, so that's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, sci-fi-ish.
I liked the quote that they have. It says, "The Vatican's astronomer, the same one who dismissed intelligent design as bad theology, said in 2010 that he'd baptize an alien because any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul. But again, only if they request it." So.
Right, so he's not going to force it upon them.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Why not? At least the church is accepting of aliens. All right, so next on Would You Buy It?
Uh-huh.
Would you buy this?
See, I'm not good with models.
So that's a no.
That's a no. It's cool though.
I would buy this if I already didn't have one that I needed to put together. And what we're talking about is the USS Reliant model kit. So this is from Polar Lights, and it is a 1/1000 scale, which model kit of the USS Reliant, NCC 1864, and it includes 40 plastic parts that snap together, and they are molded in off-white like the filming miniature used in the production of Star Trek II. And yeah, it's pretty cool. The model will be 9.5 inches long, and fans should be on the lookout for an accessory pack of water slide Aztec decals, which will be sold separately. And the Aztec decals give that paneling effect on the starship.
Right.
Which is really hard to do with painting. Like if you try to paint that, yeah, it's crazy. So this will be available in July.
Oh, awesome.
From most hobby retailers, and there you go.
This lights up as well, right?
No, it does not light up.
It doesn't.
Mainly, any lights or anything like that, you can usually get from the After Effects market.
Okay.
So a lot of model kit producers, they have aftermarket kits, which include lights that you can add and different parts that you can add to the ship to make it different. Okay. So the modeling community has a lot of people that supply those kind of extra accessories.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm glad they're reissuing this. The one I have is significantly older, I think from the mid-90s when AMT was big in the industry still. Mm-hmm. And so I have that kit. And I was actually going to turn it into the USS Tiananmen, named after the Tiananmen Square, because one of my roleplay characters in Star Trek role-playing by email served on that ship. So I was going to make it like the ship that he served on. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's right. Like how Picard has the Stargazer.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool.
They don't actually list a price on this, but from my experience with models and everything, I can assume that this will be anywhere from $25 to $40, depending on the number of pieces and how limited it is.
Okay.
So I think it'll be pretty affordable.
Nice. Now, you said this snaps together?
Yes, some of these smaller scale model kits, they are snapped together. It's only going to be 9 inches long. The one I have is probably more like 15 inches long, and that's a larger scale. It's a 1/750 scale, which a lot of the AMT ships back in the day were at. So this one's definitely smaller, and yeah, for smaller kits you can usually just snap it together, but if you're a true modeler that really takes the attention to detail, you'll probably glue this kit together, fill in the seams, sand them down, paint it, and do that. So, but this is great for kids and adults.
All right, so let's jump into the topic of the show.
Don't you mean let's beam into the topic of the show?
Oh, yeah, I prefer shuttlecraft.
Well, after this episode, I will prefer shuttlecraft as well.
So, the topic, transporter accidents and oddities.
Oh, I'm scared.
Why don't we discuss what the transporter is, if you don't already know, which you probably do, you're a Star Trek fan, and in case you don't know, the transporter, or materializer, is a subspace device capable of almost instantaneously moving an object from one location to another. Transporters are able to dematerialize, transmit, and reassemble an object. The act of transporting is often referred to as beaming. And that comes from a favorite Star Trek information source, Memory Alpha.
Yes.
And Geordi LaForge had this to say about the transporter. It really is the safest way to travel. That was in 2369. But let's talk about when things go wrong.
And I think after this episode, we'll know why McCoy hates beaming.
True that. So let's start with Enterprise.
Yes, with one of my favorite series. Mm-hmm. First in Enterprise, even in the first episode, in the premiere, all the characters were really hesitant about beaming. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, yeah, but it's been cleared for biomatter. And
this was like the first transporter cleared, right?
Yes.
Installed on a starship.
Yes, it was. So, well, I think there were ones on starships before, but that was strictly meant for cargo.
Right.
And this is the first one approved for biomatter. Mm-hmm. So they used it in certain situations before this episode on Enterprise, particularly in the premiere episode when they had to beam Archer away. And I remember that episode because Archer looked at himself like, oh my god, am I all here? I think that was my favorite moment. But we're going to talk about the first accident, which is in the episode Strange New World with Ethan Novakovich. So on this planet, they're stranded on this planet that has this pollen dust that starts affecting everyone's well-being. And there's a storm that happens, so everyone's trapped in a cave. And the captain finally decides to get the away team back to Enterprise, but the shuttle is unable to land during the storm. So the away team is forced back into this cave for the night. Mm-hmm. However, since Novakovich wouldn't go into the cave of the others because of his paranoia that was going on, it was decided to use the still experimental transporter to bring him back. But because of the storm and there was leaves blowing around, the transporter is unable to distinguish between Novakovich and the plant life being blown around. So several leaves and small twigs are embedded in his skin as a result. And originally, this episode was supposed to have him die because of those injuries. Mm-hmm. But I read that the producers thought that was probably too soon in the series to have a death.
Okay.
So it's basically assumed that he's alive. We never see the character again, mm-hmm. but there's no mention in the episode that he dies because of his injuries.
Okay.
So what did you think of this accident?
I think this is probably one of the most possible accidents to happen. I think it could even happen in the 24th century.
Right.
And it's very similar to other stories like, what was that? The Fly.
Yes.
When a fly gets in the transporter and then, they merge. Actually, it's more like another episode that we'll talk about.
Right.
But I guess it's all pretty much the same thing.
Well, I think even though, the technology improves in Star Trek, it could be said that, maybe their biofilters weren't strong enough or, the sensors weren't good enough. I think there would definitely be less of this to worry about in the 24th century, but like you said, there's an episode coming up which we'll discuss. But, I mean, to me, I think it would be more of a freak accident in the 24th century, right. Whereas in Enterprise's time, I think this is a bit more plausible to happen more frequently,
right?
If not careful.
I'm surprised it didn't happen more often, because they used it a few times, the transporter.
Yeah, and there were definitely limitations in Enterprise. I know the range was significantly shorter, mm-hmm. and you definitely couldn't do things like beaming at warp to another ship,
right,
or anything like that.
I'm sure site-to-site transport wasn't something that would happen.
No, exactly. Yeah, I don't think they would do that.
Yeah. That's that was that. And now Daedalus, mm-hmm. which has an accident with Quinn Erickson. So let's jump ahead here. So Emery Erickson is the inventor of the transporter. And in the episode we learn that he's kind of like a second father to Archer.
Yes.
And he goes aboard the Enterprise and says that he's going to be conducting experiments on a subquantum transporter, which is supposed to, theoretically, you'll be able to beam from planet to planet. Theoretically, There would be no limit to the range of this transporter. So they go to an area of space called the Barrens, where there are no stars. It's later found that the testing was a ploy so that the Enterprise transporter could be used to save Quinn Erickson, Emery Erickson's son, mm-hmm. who was trapped in the Barrens in the subspace node due to an experiment 15 years before that.
Right, and it's kind of like trying to find his signal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard about this in Star Trek before, where, oh no, we're losing their signal, or we're losing their pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it definitely plays to that. And it's kind of like in the JJ Star Trek, where Scotty was experimenting with transwarp beaming.
Right.
And he said, I'll let you know if I find Archer's prize beagle.
Right.
So we've got beagle patterns out there in space.
Walking around, yeah. And it was very, very interesting because the pattern of Erickson, it was a subspace distortion, basically, that was walking through, that would show up randomly on the ship and walk through. One crewman died when Erickson walked through him.
Yes.
T'Pol was injured on her hand when the distortion walked through her. Totally, messed up her hand, and the crewman or the officer that died, his whole face was distorted. It was like he had no more face. It was kind of gruesome to see. Yeah,
and whatever transporter, his transporter got lost in this Barrens and was trapped in this region of space. And I think it's kind of interesting that, we haven't seen anything like this before in Star Trek, but maybe it was just due to that region of space and the early transporter tests that were going on.
Right. Quinn volunteered for the test, and I believe that they were testing the subquantum transporter, and Quinn volunteered to be the first one to try it out. And this will play into my quantum state of flux later.
Gotcha.
So I thought this was a really good episode.
Yeah, I think it was very emotional, especially with Emery and dealing with the loss of his son and trying to get him back. And this also really affected Trip as well.
Right, because Trip idolized him.
Yes.
Right.
So I think this is a fantastic episode, and this is the rare episode in the 4th season that isn't a multi-parter or part of a story arc. It's one of the few 4th season standalone episodes. And it's a really good one.
I think the 4th season is my favorite season of Enterprise.
Oh, no doubt.
And this is one of the reasons why, this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, even their standalone episodes were fantastic. So next, we move into the original series. First, we're going to talk about the good and evil Kirk from the original series The Enemy Within. So, a foreign substance interferes with the normal operation of the transporter, causing it to split the personality of the subject being transported. The first cycle produces a good duplicate, while the second produces an evil one. With no shuttles, this is the early part of the first season, which had no shuttle model. A landing party is in peril until Scotty can repair the transporter.
With fear, the two Kirks are dematerialized, and the two halves are rejoined.
I'm like, what with fear? Like, what?
No, the evil Kirk was... So they beamed aboard Kirk in the episode, and Kirk is disorientated.
Yeah, and they all walk out of the transporter room, and then unbeknownst to them, a second pattern emerges. And it's the evil Kirk.
The evil Kirk, and he's, doing all sorts of bad stuff.
Which is William Shatner's, most crazy. If you want to see William Shatner act crazy, this is the episode you want to watch.
Yeah.
He is nutso in this.
Yeah.
And it's really scary.
It's really weird. He demands Saurian brandy from McCoy. He forces himself on Yeoman Rand.
Yeah.
And it's whoa! And then they,
it is whoa.
Whoa. And they're she just said you did this, Jim. And he's like, I didn't do it. Wasn't me. And then they find out that the transporter is splitting up signals into two beings with this little alien dog-like creature.
Which also split, didn't it?
It split into one docile dog
little
creature.
Puppy. Little puppy.
And then this really
vicious little bastard. Yeah.
Really aggressive bark.
Like my neighbor's dog.
Yes.
One interesting thing to note about the production of this episode. So Grace Lee Whitney, who portrayed Yeoman Rand, she recounted that while shooting the scene when a distraught and tearful Janice Rand accuses Captain Kirk of trying to rape her, William Shatner slapped her across the face to get her to register the proper emotion. As they shot the rape scene days earlier, Whitney couldn't get into the same emotion successfully, and that was Shatner's solution to the problem.
Well...
So, good old 1960s William Shatner.
Yeah, I didn't read that part. I can't believe he smacked her. But I mean, I guess I could see that. I mean, people pinch themselves to cry and all sorts of things, and as an actor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might have been hard for her, like the article said, it was hard for her to get back into that same state of mind. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if slapping someone would... I mean, that would do it, I guess, but damn.
Right.
This episode was very like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, there you go.
In this episode, the problem with being split like that is there's no balance to your character anymore. Mm-hmm. So good Kirk lost all of his passion and his drive, and he wasn't an effective leader.
Right, he couldn't make any decisions.
Right. But the evil Kirk had no self-control and no restraint. Mm-hmm. So he took it to the extreme. Right. And it's kind of like this balance that Star Trek is promoting. And, there's good and evil within all of us, and we have to make that work. And I think out of all of the characters, Spock was the one that could more easily identify with Kirk's problem in this episode.
Right.
Because Spock has to struggle with his human and Vulcan side all the time. So I thought this was a really good episode.
I thought it was a good episode. I thought the premise didn't make sense, but I thought it was a good story.
Yes, a good story.
Because obviously there's no way to transport, even with a foreign substance caught in the transporter, it's not going to split your personality.
Right.
Down the middle. And both the good and the bad couldn't exist without each other, so they would die if they weren't rejoined.
Yeah.
So, and thankfully they were successful in combining them, because the dog creature didn't survive.
Right.
And they said that was because of the fear of what was happening. And
so both of the little dog things were scared, and that's what killed it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the evil Kirk was afraid of dying. He screams, "I want to live."
Yes.
Towards the end of the episode. And then, Kirk's like, basically, get a hold of yourself, let's go. You will live, and I'll live, together as one, something along those lines.
Little side note, did you know this is the first episode to show the Vulcan nerve pinch?
I did not.
As well as the first time McCoy says he's dead, Jim.
Oh, I did not know that.
So this was 2 Star Trek firsts in this episode.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I watched the episode, and then I asked on Twitter why the shuttlecraft was never used. I was like, did they even mention the shuttle? Because it could have been like, the shuttle couldn't go through the atmosphere or something. They could have had a line like that. I don't remember them mentioning anything. And it wasn't until a couple episodes later in the Galileo 7 when they finally have a shuttle in the series. It was funny seeing a combination of, 1960s effects, but Sulu's there in the cold. Like, the temperature is supposed to drop down to, negative 400 degrees or something like that. And he's there shivering with 3 other guys, and they put it kind of looks like frost on their eyebrows and stuff.
Yeah, it looks bad though.
yeah, it does. But the original series has awesome storytelling.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's a great story.
Yeah. So next, the Mirror Universe. So as we all know, hopefully, an ion storm interferes with the transporter, increasing the power and bridging 2 different universes together. The Kirk, Scotty, McCoy, and Uhura of our universe transport aboard at the same moment their mirror universe counterparts, causing them to switch places. Scotty is then able to reproduce the power surge and is able to transport them back to the Prime universe before the bridge between the universes collapsed.
It's interesting that the transporter has such a powerful effect that it can cause things like this. And it always seems that the transporter is fine until something unexpected interacts with it.
Right.
Here it's an ion storm. Previously, it's pieces of material that aren't expected. And it's interesting that the transporter, while so sophisticated, it doesn't seem like it takes a lot of it for an outside source to interfere with it,
right,
to produce negative effects. But I think this is interesting because this shows that the transporter can be used to access another universe, which is crazy.
It is, and the transporter seems to be like a go-to plot device in these stories, which, sometimes it feels like it's overused.
A little bit, and I mean, it's even been used to time travel.
Right.
It's been used to put people into stasis for 70 years or more.
Right.
It's been used to cure people. Yeah, cure people of diseases.
Yep.
And we know that the transporter has biofilters, so no.
Well, in the 24th century.
Right. And it's interesting that the transporter has all these different uses, or they can, but I don't know if they should all the time. And like you said, it's kind of overused.
Another example, Rascals, where we have
oh God, yeah, where they turn into like what I like to call Star Trek babies.
Yeah,
instead of Muppet babies.
Yeah, and then they use the transporter again to fix them.
Even though it's like, where does that extra mass go? And
yeah, and
then not to get into too deep with the transporter, but there's that metaphysical aspect where if we're transported, we're being destroyed. So is the person that is on the other end of the transport, is that really me?
Right.
Or is that just a copy of me? And, is that the original me, or is it someone different? And that's for just normal beaming. So
right.
So it's no wonder that there are so many accidents and oddities with the transporter.
And in the episode Daedalus, they say there were protests about this, and they bring up the exact same thing you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical question that we'll have to address, or we can address it now, but I think if there's ever a time in our history where we create this technology, and I don't think it would ever be in our lifetime. I think there was one Science of Star Trek article that said that to break something down and to basically destroy it, and then the power to reassemble it exactly as it was, I think it was something crazy, like it'd take the entire power of the sun to do that or something.
Right.
Like, it's just an insane amount of energy that I honestly don't think that we'll ever see this happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, because you have to heat up the molecules to break them apart, basically.
Right.
So you're like basically exploding yourself. So that must be painful.
Well, and that's the thing. It's never really shown in Star Trek that beaming is painful.
Right.
The only thing is, in some episodes, it feels like they can feel it start to happen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't affect them negatively. It's not like,
Right.
It's not like that every time.
Right. And
otherwise, who would do it?
Yeah. I think we should talk a little bit more about that in the Realm of Fear.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, let's just jump right into TNG then.
Yeah, let's do it. Actually, do you want to skip to Realm of Fear?
Yeah, let's talk about Realm of Fear first.
Okay.
So in Realm of Fear, the issue of transporter psychosis is brought up. And this episode focuses on Lieutenant Reginald Barclay, who, as a lot of people should know, he's kind of like the hypochondriac of the Star Trek universe. And he's always going to the doctor and the counselor, and with some kind of medical issue or what he believes is a medical issue.
Mm-hmm.
So transporter psychosis is an incurable medical condition. It's caused by a breakdown of neurochemicals during transport, affecting the body's motor functions, autonomic systems, and the higher reasoning centers of the brain. A victim of transporter psychosis suffers from paranoid delusions, multi-infarct dementia, hallucinations, somatic, tactile, and visual, and psychogenic hysteria. Peripheral symptoms include sleeplessness, accelerated heart rate, diminished eyesight leading to acute myopia, painful spasms in the extremities, and in most cases, dehydration.
Crap, I got transporter psychosis.
Yeah, it's like transporter psychosis may cause peripheral systems.
Barclay probably looked up the 24th century equivalent of WebMD.
Yeah.
It's like, oh crap, I have transporter psychosis.
So there were some cases of transporter psychosis reported as early as the mid-22nd century, which was actually mentioned in the episode Daedalus, which we just talked about. However, it wasn't officially diagnosed until 2209 on Delinia 2. It was eliminated by the invention of the multiplex pattern buffer in 2310, and that was mentioned in Realm of Fear. So it seemed like this was something that could happen even in Kirk's time, all through Enterprise and Kirk's time. So in 2369, in this episode, Realm of Fear, Lieutenant Barclay believed that he was suffering from transport psychosis after he was infected by a quasi-energy microbes while transporting to the disabled USS Yosemite. This was significant as there had not been a fully diagnosed case in almost 60 years. When actually what had happened was he thought he saw these microbes in the pattern buffer, but he was able to hold on to one of them and actually transport one of the crew members of the Yosemite.
Right.
So it's actually kind of funny because his paranoid delusions, his WebMD of the Star Trek universe, his paranoia,
right,
actually helped save some people.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Some instances, it seems that the transporter completely breaks you down and you have no knowledge of what happened from point A to point B.
Right.
And then it seems like you're fully conscious throughout the whole transporter cycle.
And we've seen multiple instances of that because sometimes they'll start talking mid-transport and then they resume their conversation after they're done transporting. We've seen that in the Star Trek movies, specifically in Star Trek 4, because in the original series, whenever they transported, it was like they froze. It was like...
Right.
But in Star Trek 4, Gillian Taylor, when she's getting beamed up, and it's like, oh my God, what's happening to me? And then it's like, but what just happened? Right. So yeah, we've seen it both ways, where they completely freeze, which I think is what should happen.
Yeah, right.
Because you want the pattern buffer and you want the angular confinement beam. Right. To capture you. Mm-hmm. And we've also seen cases in Star Trek where if they get outside of the confinement beam or they somehow move during transport, sometimes it goes wrong. And so we've seen many different ways, and they're kind of inconsistent. Mm-hmm. But part of me wonders if it's different transporter systems. Because in Star Trek 4, it was the Klingon transporter. Right. Mm-hmm. So maybe theirs works slightly differently. Right. Where it can allow for that.
Yeah, and we see this episode, Realm of Fear, Barclay he's in the beam, but it still looks like him in the beam.
Right.
But there's all this fuzzy, sparkling things going around him. And then he sees these microbes, and then he reaches out and actually grabs them. Right.
And I don't know. And maybe it's something where, from your perspective, it's different, in a transporter. Maybe you think you're whole, but maybe it's just I don't know. It's see, this is that metaphysical stuff that we can get into.
Right.
And
it's like you shouldn't be able to see anything. You're being ripped apart right now.
Right, you're unconscious. And it's not like if you're transported, you're still a conscious living being. You're
right. Isn't
molecules.
Like you have like a little bubble around you.
Right.
And it would be one thing if there was like a subspace bubble around you. And
or if you were through a wormhole. But this isn't a wormhole. This is a transporter.
Exactly. Right.
Another thing I wanted to bring out, a little bit off topic, but it's interesting to note that throughout all the Star Trek series, there are different beaming effects.
Yeah.
And we know that's because, artistic license, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But part of me wants to think that that's also a visual representation of the technology advancing.
Okay.
Because, like in Voyager, it's like you've got multiple, orbs that come together and come apart.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the original series, it's more like an outline with the sparklies.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the Next Generation, it's still the sparklies.
And water.
But it's more like a elongated beam.
Right.
And we've seen different alien transport effects too, where sometimes it's more wispy and it looks like whoosh, and they just disappear.
Right.
And so we've seen all kinds of crazy transporters, which is another thing. Like, I would be scared that if I went through this aliens transporter, that it would affect me differently than if I went through a Starfleet one.
Right. Yeah, like, what if theirs isn't as advanced and now I have cancer because I use their transporter?
Or what if I have transporter psychosis because of these guys?
Right.
Yeah, just because, the invention of the multiplex pattern buffer happened in the 2310s doesn't mean that the Klingons got one.
Right. Yeah.
Or they ever invented one. Like, for all we know, they really don't care about how people are affected in the transporter.
Right. I don't think they would care.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think people in Star Trek, and, maybe we're just saying this because in that fictional universe, this is a common everyday thing for them. It's like, oh, I'll just transport, and here I am. Mm-hmm. But I would think about it a lot more if I were. I would like, whoa, I'm not going in that Klingons transporter. I don't know what happened.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's taken for granted in the 24th century.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why accidents like this happen.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, let's talk about the episode Second Chances.
Okay.
Which I really like this episode.
Yes.
So, stranded on a planet for 8 years, a duplicate of William T. Riker is created when a massive energy surge in the distortion field around the planet occurs just at the moment Riker tries to beam out. The transporter chief at the time tried to compensate by initiating a second containment beam. However, Commander Riker's pattern maintained its integrity by just the one confinement beam. Mm-hmm. And even when the second beam was shut down, somehow it was reflected back to the surface of the planet and another William Riker materialized. The confinement beam must have had the exact same phase variance as the distortion field, hence the two identical Rikers. They both materialized from the same pattern and are identical.
I don't like that.
You don't like that it created a duplicate?
Yeah, because kind of like why I don't like The Enemy Within. Because I feel that when you're being transported, it's not like this stuff can be copied. Where's that mass coming from? Where's that extra mass coming from? It just can't come out of nowhere. Well, here's the thing. Yeah. The replicators are based off transporter technology, but they're taking waste material or, stock material and reforming that into food or clothes or whatever you need. Mm-hmm. But it's not, the replicator isn't taking something out of thin air. It's using material to make something. It's like the law of equivalent, it's like the law of equivalent exchange or something. You can't create one thing without taking it from somewhere else. And that's why I have a problem with like the duplicate thing in Star Trek, because from a scientific standpoint, how are those molecules, how are those atoms getting duplicated? where is that mass coming from? Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying. If we
like a Xerox copy or something? Like, I don't know.
Like, so you have the transporter, right? The transporter, and you're beaming down. It's taking the matter and converting it to energy, and then back into matter. So there must have been enough energy in that second confinement beam to be converted back into matter.
I don't know.
Or it could do this. It could take matter from the surrounding area, say oxygen molecules, and recombining it to create the matter needed. I
guess. I don't know. I think it's... I just think it's a little weird. Like, well, I know this...
weird. It's definitely weird.
I know this is a total fictional technology, but I still think there needs to be a little bit of plausibility to it. Mm-hmm. And that's just my big thing with these duplicates.
So you don't think this is plausible in the Star Trek universe? Like,
well,
it should be possible.
Well, anything's possible in the Star Trek universe. We've seen that.
Right.
But I don't know. I think this is taking a little bit more of the fiction in science fiction.
I see. I don't know. I was okay with it. I thought it was a really interesting story.
It's a great story.
I wish William T. Riker, William T. Riker. I wish that Thomas Riker, because the duplicate takes Thomas.
Right.
I wish he was crazier in the episode, because you're there alone for 8 years. I feel like there should have been a little bit more going on. Well, and like when Counselor Troy went to talk to him, she barely diagnosed him. She just like talked to him like, "Hey, how are you?" And then she started a relationship with this guy.
Well, here's the thing. I think Riker was such a great Starfleet officer, and he definitely had survival training, like all Starfleet officers do. So I think he would be well prepared to survive on this planet even alone. I know it might be traumatic for some people, but I think Riker is such a strong character that he could get through it, and he did. I don't think there was that many psychological issues. I think the main issue came when he beamed back and saw that, there was another version of him leading this different life.
Right.
I think that's where the issues come in.
Right. That's true, and that's why later on in Deep Space Nine he takes the courses of action that he takes.
Exactly. But I think it's fascinating. And it was great to see that character again. I'm glad they didn't forget about him.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought him back as well.
Yeah.
Watch the episode. I forget the name of it. It might be called The Defiant. I believe it's called The Defiant, where he's basically working for the Maquis and commandeers the Defiant.
Mm-hmm.
And he shaved. It was funny. So Riker has a beard, right? So
yes.
To distinguish them, after he commandeers the ship, he pulls off these like fake little patches of hair on his cheeks, and he just has this goatee, which I thought was hysterical.
Oh yeah, gotta rock the evil goatee.
yeah, true that, because Spock, right?
Exactly, because Spock.
Yeah, because Spock.
Well, speaking of Deep Space Nine,
we
have time travel in Deep Space Nine's past tense two-parter. So, due to chronoton particles emitted by the cloaking device and an explosion caused by a passing microscopic singularity, there was an increase in temporal energy. This led to Sisko, Bashir, and Dax being transported to San Francisco of the 21st century. Miles and Kira were able to duplicate the conditions and transported to several time periods to locate and retrieve the missing crew members. So, opposed to the transporter going to another universe, now we can basically have time travel.
Right, which...
And the thing is, if they're able to duplicate these conditions, you can time travel whenever the hell you wanted to.
Yeah, and
potentially.
And one of the things that they were talking about in the episode was they only had enough of these chronoton particles to try about 10 times. the transport.
Right.
But I was thinking to myself, why don't you just turn on the cloaking device, which caused these particles, and get more particles?
That's a really good point.
Like, why can't you just do that? So
I don't know.
But I thought this was a great socially aware episode.
Yes.
I just watched this episode today, and I was surprised about this because this aired, maybe 90. This was the third season, so that would be.
Oh, the third season, that would be 96?
96, okay.
96, 97.
Alright, yeah, so about then, I was like in 6th grade at the time, so I probably didn't
I was a freshman, yeah.
Yeah, so I probably didn't grasp the totality of this episode back then.
Yeah, the episode had some great social commentary, and I think it's relevant today because, they're talking about people out of jobs and, all these work districts and people being split up to control the homeless and this and that. And I think this episode, where they beamed to, wasn't it like 2020 or some...
Yeah,
it was a time for... Yeah, it was really close to our time.
Yep.
And... it's kind of scary to think about. Are we going that way? Like what? I thought it was a fascinating episode. So, and that's what the transporter and these plot devices do. Like they may be funky, and we might not get all the full explanation, but really they're just there as a plot device for great stories.
Mm-hmm. And this was a great story, 2-parter. If you have the time, I highly suggest you watch it.
If you have the time.
Oh, snap.
Time travel.
So in this episode, it takes place in 2024, and they have basically they have the internet. They call it the net.
Right.
And they have these touch screens, but it's not really touch screen. They have to use a stylus to touch it. So they were probably like, man, by that time we're not going to have the touch screens that we have in the 24th century, right? So we can't show that. Right. So let's take the Palm Pilots that we have and imagine that as the computer interface.
Right.
So I thought that was really funny, considering like right now we have touch screens everywhere.
Yes.
So I thought that was funny, but that was 1996 probably. So yeah, good stuff.
Go internet.
Yeah, it was the internet was still in its infancy back then.
Right.
It wasn't the internet that we have today.
No, God no.
So it was, and it wasn't in the episode. It wasn't the internet that we have today. Like people had their own channels to communicate with. Mm-hmm. It was weird.
It was very weird.
Anyway, good episode, good social episode. Check it out. Next, an episode that I was pleasantly surprised with.
Really? A Voyager episode?
It was a Voyager episode.
My God! I can't believe you sat through one.
Yes.
Shut up.
Remember, I sat through a 2-hour episode with you of Voyager.
You did, which
yes.
I was very thankful for.
Yes.
It's a rare event.
We should do another one. Maybe not a 2-hour one, but another Voyager episode.
Oh, wow. This is monumental in this podcast.
So the episode we're talking about is Tuvix.
Fantastic episode.
So, alien plant life samples are collected by Tuvok and Neelix. During transport, the patterns are merged into one, later calling itself Tuvix. It is determined that one of the plants mate through symbiogenesis. While their patterns were broken down in the transporter, the alien orchid caused the two patterns, the patterns of the plant life and Tuvok and Neelix to combine into one being.
My God.
The Doctor finally was able to reverse the process by radioactively labeling half of Tuvix's genome, so the transporter was able to lock on and separate the individuals. Tuvix, after weeks of becoming part of the crew, didn't want to give up his new life, and then it becomes a moral dilemma where the doctor refuses to perform the procedure, and Janeway decides that this is going to happen, and her and Kim carry out the separation of Tuvix back into Neelix and Tuvok.
Right.
What'd you think of the episode?
I thought this episode was great because it really posed that moral dilemma. You know, what happens when two separate individuals are basically destroyed, but a new person is created.
Right.
And it's a big moral dilemma because Janeway and some other people, they want Tuvok and they want Neelix back.
Like Kes.
Like Kes. Kes wanted Neelix back. She loved Neelix. And that's the thing, but this is a new person with new ideas and a new soul, essentially. I mean, it's a new person. He might have the memories and the abilities of both of them, but he is his own individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the moral question that this episode provides, is it, should we even destroy him?
Mm-hmm.
Did Tuvok and Neelix's lives should have ended because of this accident? And is it even right for us to destroy this new person to get two people back?
Right. And it seemed like the two parts were better as one. I don't want to say that, but it seemed like the characteristics of both worked very well to create this new individual.
Right. And it's kind of ironic because, you know, Neelix and Tuvok, throughout Voyager's run, Neelix was always trying to get Tuvok's approval.
Mm-hmm.
Neelix even wanted to volunteer to be on the security team. And it seemed like they always saw eye to eye on different things. And Neelix always wanted to gain the approval of Tuvok. So it's interesting to see that when the two of them merge, they become this greater being.
Right.
With his own unique ideas and his own unique solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Yeah, it took the best of them,
mm-hmm.
and maybe the worst of them too, but it was still one person. And I thought this was a powerful episode. Obviously, they couldn't have kept Tuvix around because then you're getting rid of two main characters.
Right.
So I can see from like a episode point of view. But God, at points this was really hard to watch because you can, and it was so well acted
right.
that you
Definitely.
could see the emotion, and I think this is one of Voyager's most powerful episodes.
No, I agree. I feel like they could have used the transporter to create a duplicate, right, of Tuvix, right? Set him aside.
Okay.
Then have the original Tuvix inject him with the radioactive material, whatever, right, to separate the genomes.
So you're saying that they could take what people have learned in the past in the Star Trek universe and duplicate those conditions to have this third option where you keep Tuvix,
mm-hmm.
but you also get back your original two people.
Right.
Why the hell didn't they think of that?
Who knows? I mean, in retrospect, I mean, I watched all these episodes preparing for this, so I'm thinking...
Well, see, so the solution for you is right there. It's clear.
Yeah, right.
But it might not have been clear to the characters at the time.
Right, and I'm sure it wasn't. It took weeks for the Doctor to come up with a way to separate them.
Right. To
begin with.
And in that time, in those weeks, Tuvix became his own integral part of the crew in his own way.
Right,
and that's where the dilemma was, because the longer he was in that ship, the more friendships and attachments that he created with different crew members.
Right, exactly.
So then you have to mourn his loss.
Right, because Janeway even said if we were able to do it right when Tuvix materialized, we wouldn't have had this moral dilemma at all. It would have just been done.
Yeah. But because they got to know him as a person, that's where this issue came up. And it's almost kind of like a measure of a man type of situation. Is this person that has, the combined personalities of two people, does he have a right to exist?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like I think it's taken the best of Star Trek, and this is what Star Trek is all about. It's about moral dilemmas and how we deal with that just in a science fiction setting.
Right.
So, thumbs up to Tuvix.
Yeah.
I know some people hate Voyager, but this is one that I highly recommend. If you have never watched Voyager, watch this episode, because I think you'll have a different opinion.
Yeah, no, and like the entire premise of the episode seems absurd.
Right. Well, with all of these, the transporter is a absurd piece of science fiction technology.
Right. No, I'm just saying, just having these two individuals being combined into one.
Right.
And I think that made me feel like this episode was going to be, a total comical episode.
No, but you couldn't be more wrong.
I couldn't be more wrong. You're right. And I went into this episode thinking I was gonna hate this episode, and at the end of it, I liked it. I was like, because this was one of the first ones I watched, because I was like, I'm gonna watch this one because I want to save the other episodes for last, because I want a good episode to end on.
Wow.
I think I should have done it the other way. I think this episode.
So, are you saying this was probably the best episode to end on?
I'm going to toss up between Tuvix and Past Tense.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Both moral episodes, I think.
Right. What's great about this episode, and I know we're really harping on this episode, but it's really good. But I don't think you could have taken any other two Voyager characters and done the same thing. I don't think it would have been as effective. Mm-hmm. Because here you've got Tuvok, one of the most logical Vulcans in all of Star Trek. And then you've got Neelix, one of the most happy-go-lucky. Well, he's also got a dark past, but he's also in his own way a complex character. I know some people might not like him, but Neelix is great. And those two characters by themselves are at such polar opposite ends of the spectrum, but that's why they interact so well together, and that's where you get some of the comedy in some episodes and also some of the drama. And this episode highlights the drama aspect of bringing these two characters together, literally.
Right, yes. And I was thinking from another series, right? If this situation occurred, what two characters would I put in this situation? And immediately I'm pulled towards Odo and Quark.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. That would have been perfect.
Because we do have that episode where they're stranded together.
Right. But you're saying pull a Tuvix on them.
Pull a Tuvix on them. A Quardo.
Quardo? Okay, fan fiction writers, get on to make the DS9 episode Quardo.
Or we could do...
Wait.
Old Quark? I don't know. That doesn't sound as good.
What about from Next Generation?
Man.
Worf and...
Who did he always... I kind of want to say Alexander.
No. Oh, weird. What about Worf and somehow Worf and Data?
They do have that sometimes, that interaction.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess.
I can't. And their names wouldn't work. It'd be like Warda or.
Yeah, like the chemistry between the characters isn't the same, I think, as Tuvok and Neelix, and then we have Quark and Odo. Like, they have this dynamic together, both sets of characters, that's unique from any other series.
Here's the thing. What about Spock and McCoy?
Wow.
Spock and
McCoy.
Spock.
Spock. Yeah, that's good.
I don't want to say the other one because that sounds dirty. Like McCock. I mean, what?
Yeah, no, that's true. They have that same dynamic.
Right.
Love-hate kind of dynamic.
Yes. All right. Well, moving on.
Yeah. But seriously, fanfic. Get on that.
Yes, get on Cordo.
You know what? I'm gonna write it. So moving on to the next topic of the show, the subspace channels. And this week's question: transporters are scary. Besides Scotty and O'Brien, who would you trust to dematerialize you? So Eric?
Spock.
Spock?
He's got the most scientific knowledge. I would want Spock. Or 2009 Chekhov. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 Chekhov.
True, but the only reason why I would vote against him is because Amanda died.
God, that wasn't his fault. I mean,
I'm not saying it was his fault, but you know.
But he could track them, and whatever.
No, that's my only qualm with that.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, mine would be Data.
Oh yeah, Data's a good choice.
Because he would be able to work those controls like a piano in case something was going on.
He can work any controls like a piano.
Yeah. So I mean, that I would pick Data.
All right, cool.
So let's see what other people have to say.
Yes.
So from Twitter, we have our friend at Sci-Fi Commons. He was on the show a while back. He says Spock.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's my choice.
Yeah.
I think that's the most logical choice.
Oh, snap. Moving on to Facebook, we have Lisa Clark, who says Trip.
I like Trip, but I don't think he's technologically advanced as the other characters in terms of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would trust him with 22nd century transporters, but I wouldn't trust him with a 24th century one.
Right. It's like a steamboat captain, you know.
Right.
In command.
It's like a steamboat captain, yeah. It's totally like that.
In command of the Enterprise NCC 1701. You know, problems would occur that he couldn't handle.
Exactly.
That was my point there. Next, we have Nicole, who says Picard, LaForge, Data, and Riker.
So all of them together working the transporter?
I guess. I feel like she's a Next Gen fan.
Really? I don't know
because basically she picks the whole cast of the next generation.
I want them all to transport me.
Oh, snap.
Next, your fiancée, Ashley Wong, she says Data.
Oh.
You two have very similar answers. Maybe that's why you're getting married.
Maybe, because I said Data as well, and I feel like the last question we asked...
Yes, you had the same answer as her.
Right.
I sense a conspiracy.
Maybe. Perhaps.
Our co-host, Marty Hogan, he said no one. He trusts no one to transport him.
Similar to McCoy, who hated the transporter.
Well, like I said, I think after our talk, I'd be very hesitant as well to use a transporter. As cool as that would be. God, I would love a transporter. I could see friends across the country. I could go to different places without, a plane ticket. It would be amazing.
It would be.
But then I could have a leaf blown into me, and then...
Well, what if we used the Galaxy Quest transporter? Where
How is that different?
You're basically in a bubble, traveling through space towards the ship.
Well, then I'd be crapping my pants.
I suppose, but you wouldn't be pulled apart.
Oh, there you go. That's true. Yeah. As long as I'm not pulled apart and essentially destroyed, that'd be great.
What if you couldn't feel it?
I don't think that's the point. The point is if I'm gonna, I'm sure they don't feel it anyway in Star Trek, but I don't want to be. That's the thing. It's going back to that metaphysical question. Right. What if I'm not me?
Yeah.
When you're essentially dying every time you get in a transporter, you're dead, and then you're reassembled. It's weird. It's just weird.
It is very weird.
Next, we have Christine Isabel, who says...
Which is Marty's wife.
Oh. Well, hello, Christine. And she said LaForge or Spock.
Good choices. I feel like an engineer would always be...
Oh, yeah. An engineer or a scientist. That's who I want.
There you go. Next, we have Marty and I's friend, Michael Mikowitz, who agrees with you, Eric, and says Chekhov from the new series.
Yes. Good choice.
Good choice. Next, moving on to Google+, we have Daft ASMR. I don't think that's pronounceable.
Maybe it's an acronym.
I hope. If that's your real name, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it, Daft.
Or Daft to Asmir, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay.
Who says, Dr. McCoy, he'd be careful, and if anything went wrong, he'd be there to put me back together again.
But I don't know if he'd have the technical expertise to actually transport you. I feel like him transporting you would be the problem itself.
Yeah, right. Next, Daniel Price says an extra. They usually do a decent job.
You know, Daniel has a very good point, because there are countless episodes where it's just some dude behind the controls and it's like, and it always goes well.
Right.
I think he's right. I'm going to go with his pick now. I'm going to go with a trained extra.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a perfect choice.
Now, the next one, we actually have the Romulan Star Empire answer us. So, this is a big deal, you guys. This is the entire empire of the Romulans. And they said, if I have to choose, I would prefer Ensign Hoshi Sato. I bet you would, Romulan Star Empire.
Those perverts. Those damn Romulans.
They want her for something more than her linguistic skills, if you know what I mean.
Whoa, hey now.
Starfleet Command After Dark.
Next, we have David Pick, who says tragedies in history would dictate if I'd volunteer to use it.
So I think he said if there was a tragedy in history, that's when he would use the transporter. Like, barring any tragedies, he's not going to use the transporter.
Gotcha. Okay, and then these are his examples. If he was in a burning skyscraper with no way down and no escape from the fire, there would be no other option. Absolutely, I'd volunteer to beam off-site. Okay. However, if an orbit in a perfectly good shuttlecraft was available and an option to land, I'd use the shuttle first before beaming down. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, the shuttles were originally created in Star Trek. I mean, there were shuttles long before transporters. And
right.
I think they're pretty fast anyway. I mean, they can go from ground to orbit in minutes, and boom, you're on the shuttlecraft.
Right.
But I don't know. I would probably think the same way. I would reserve the transporter for an emergency situation where I need to get out of there in a split second.
Right, and that was exactly what they did on Enterprise.
Yes, and I'm glad they did that because it was such an unproven piece of technology. So I think that was a smart move.
Exactly.
Next, we have Robert Hader, who said, Data or Geordi, as long as I wasn't the last one to get beamed. I'd want to be the last one, because if everyone else didn't make it, then don't beat me.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, hey, you guys go first.
Let's see how that goes. Yeah. Next, we have...
Well, this is new.
Yes, we have some answers I asked on Star Trek Risa, which is a Star Trek social network site that we've mentioned before on the show. We now have a page over there, so if anyone wants to go over there and follow our Star Trek Risa page, please do. And you can also follow me over there, and
me,
and Eric. So you should.
Which I've got to use it more, but
you do.
Like on any social networking site, you can find me over there at TrekUB47.
Right, and you can find me at Nova Charter.
And how can we find the Starfleet Escape Podcast?
You can find it at SF Escape Pod.
So just like our Twitter.
Just like the Twitter, right.
Just like the Twitters.
Try to keep it all the same there.
So what do those fine folks over there have to say?
So we have Andreas Butcher Mack, who says, Lieutenant Barclay, he knows the dangers, and he is a brilliant technician.
You know what? I would agree with him. Barclay, for all of his neurotic tendencies, he is really good at what he does, job-wise.
Right, he's proven that several times.
Yeah, and he helped in some way bring Voyager back home. So,
right.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Next, we have Drake, who said, Spock, an expert at most everything.
True. Good choice. Next, we have Storm, who says Data would have expert skill in a transport.
I think Data has expert skills in most everything he does.
Exactly.
Much like Spock. You can't go wrong with Spock or Data.
Right. No way.
Next, we have Paula Jeffostar, who said, B'Elanna's quite good at all that engineering stuff. I reckon I'd trust her to beam me somewhere.
Why not? Well, again, engineer, and we said engineers or scientists.
Yes.
Be a good technician, I guess, to transport you. Or an extra, we've determined.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the extra. I'm going to go with gold shirt number 12 for this one.
Yeah. So that wraps up our social questions there.
Now we move on. Aaron, what puts your quantum state into flux?
I'm glad you asked.
Well, I'm glad I asked too, because I want to hear.
This is more of a rant than anything else.
Well, it's still fluxing you, so...
It's still fluxing me. And the funny thing is, the subspace transporter puts your state in a quantum flux.
Holy crap! It all ties together.
This
does. This is the moment we've been waiting for.
So, the subspace transporter, sub-quantum transporter, and finally transwarp beaming are all techniques to extend transporter range. The TNG episode, Bloodlines, was the first episode to utilize a transport technique that was greater than 40,000 kilometers.
Yes.
In that episode, it was said the technology was highly unstable and the Federation gave up its development because of unreliability in the energy requirements of the technology. Although the Ferengi Bach was able to transport about 300 billion kilometers. The next attempt we see at long-range transport was the Enterprise episode Daedalus. It was said to be a flawed technology that was also studied by the Vulcans. If it worked, it would have been able to transport you from planet to planet, basically eliminating the need for Starfleet starships. Now for the final long-range transport technology, transwarp beaming. Unlike the others, which had flaws or didn't work at all, this seems to work with no issues in the last two feature films. Was Scotty able to fulfill Erickson's dream of transporting from planet to planet without a starship? Yup. Now I guess Star Trek III can just take place on a huge transporter pad. One of the biggest mistakes in the new Star Trek films was to allow a technology like transwarp beaming, while all the other series would have purposely made the technology dangerous.
End
rant.
That was a good rant. Okay, first I want to say, the extending the range. 40,000 kilometers is basically the circumference of the Earth. So that's like 24,000 something miles. That's pretty huge range to begin with.
Right.
Like that's why they're able to beam down in orbit to a planet. I mean, that's huge. Right. But I can understand them wanting to extend the range, but I don't think it's necessary because you have starships, even with warp drive.
Right.
And my big problem is, well, sure, you can transport those great distances, but what if the planet you're beaming to doesn't have the same technology to bring you back?
Right.
That's my thing. Like,
I guess you could. The person that beamed you over could just lock onto you again.
It seems like they would have to also develop their sensors better. Like, there'd have to be an advance in sensor technology. If you're going to beam someone 4 400, 300 billion kilometers away, you're going to need a sensor that will basically be able to pick you and then scan every single one of your molecules. I just think it's never going to happen, even in the Star Trek universe.
Well, they have, in the last 2 movies, anyway, perfected transwarp beaming.
Which I think is one of the biggest flaws in the movies.
Right.
Because even if it's an alternate universe, they still never had that technology in the Prime one.
Right, and even if it was Scotty in the 24th century, let's say, is the one that was able to develop this equation, would Starfleet would have pursued it in the 24th century, 25th century?
Right, but
if Spock knew about it, why didn't he? I don't know.
I just think that it's, for me, I would think it would only be a one-way trip.
Well, look at it like this. If you transport with one of those portable transporters that Khan had.
Yeah, but see, to me, that seems like BS too, because...
Oh, no, it was total BS. I really hate that.
Yeah.
That's like the whole point of my rant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, how can you transport with the transporter you're transporting with, because the energy...
Oh, no, I would just transport another
dumb.
one.
Oh, it's still dumb.
Oh, no, it's totally dumb.
I totally agree with it, with your rant. Yeah, I don't know. But even in the 29th century in Star Trek, they still had ships. They even had time ships.
Right.
But the point is they still had ships. Like, I don't think you're ever going to do space travel without ships, unless, it was some network of transporter, like Stargate, exactly. Right. Like Stargate had the Stargates, and it was a network of essentially transporters, but that was using wormhole technology. So I think the way Star Trek handles beaming, that's only going to happen with a mobile platform like a starship, where all the equipment is there to beam you back and forth. And I think a long-range transporter, you're taking out the mobile part of it. And my thing is, you would have to have amazing scanners that would need to have the resolution to capture you from that long of a distance. And even in the Star Trek universe, I don't think they have long-range sensors, but it's never the detail where, oh yeah, I can see that, you've got this microbe right here. Like, no, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, that's very fluxing.
Right, and the reverse, transporting you to a far-off place, the exact point where you want to go. Highly doubtful.
There's too many variables there, because the point that you're traveling from is moving, because the universe is constantly expanding.
Right.
And so your plan is flying at, millions of miles an hour, and the planet that you're doing on the other side of the galaxy that you want a long-range transport to is going at million miles an hour. And it's like the transporter works as a beam.
And you get all the stuff in between.
Right, yeah, because now my pattern's going to go through a star or a black hole or dark matter. See, with it's no problem that the range is basically the circumference of Earth, because there's still you can still relatively travel with the planet. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a greater point that you can stay aimed at the point you're beaming at, and there's less stuff in between too.
Right.
So yeah, that's my whole big thing with the new JJ universe. I agree with you. I hate that with a passion. I hate that they brought it back into darkness, and Kirk or that Khan was just like, bloop, I'm in the Klingon homeworld now. Like, no, God, why?
Yeah. Terrible.
Terrible.
But yeah, so
this fluxed us quite a bit, but there it is.
There it is, and let me know if you're as fluxed as we are about this, because I like to know if I'm sure most original primers. Yeah, I'm gonna call us.
Primers! I like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna call us primers.
All right.
Like us primers are like, you know what? There's no way that's going to happen. No way that's possible. That's stupid.
Well, you know what? I think we'll trek you guys later.
Trek you later. Thank you all for listening. So, Eric.
Yes.
I know we've said this last several episodes, but where can we find you on the internet if we wanted to locate you?
I am basically Trekkie B47 on all social media networks. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, ask.fm, Tumblr, all that stuff.
All that good stuff.
Trekkie B47. And Aaron, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under @Nova Charter.
Oh, and Star Trek Ryza.
And Star Trek Ryza at Nova Charter.
And at Trekkie B47.
So
basically, just do a search.
Just search Nova Charter, Trekkie B47, you'll find us. It's probably us. If not, they're imposters.
And then tell us if you find an imposter.
Yeah, they're transporter duplicates of us.
My God.
So until next time.
Trek you later.
Trek you later. Keep on trekking.
It's trekking time.
By Riker's beard. You have been listening to the Starfleet Escape Podcast on the Four-Eyed Radio Network, where you can catch a new episode every other Monday. You can find us on the web at sfescapepod.com. Follow us on Twitter at sfescapepod. Like us on Facebook.com/sfescapepod. And add us to your circle on Google Plus by going to google.sfescapepod.com.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode brought to you on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you want to see more shows, check out foureyedradio.com, Sorry about that.